crazy. We took off on the airplane, on the National Airborne Operations Center airplane, went to Washington, D.C., to Andrews Air Force Base, and we were picking up some dignitaries to bring them back here. And klaxoned, that's a term that they use for get back to the plane within 5 minutes or we're going to leave you. And so we were all running back to the plane, and we got on the plane and we took off, and the back end got us a feed from the news networks, and we just sat there in stunned silence, like, what? That's crazy. I was just stunned. If you'd have told me before that day that somebody would have flown an airplane into a building, that didn't even cross my mind. And we get all kinds of training in the military for, you need to think outside the box and you need to be aware of your surroundings. And I would have never thought that. I would have never thought that somebody could actually get into the front end of the plane and fly it into a building. It was mind-boggling. And all the people that were on the plane with me, we picked up probably 20 people, and they were all the same way, just stunned silence. What? This can't be happening. Not in our country.
My responsibility at the time that day was to go out and take care of a visit that we had, a large visit by retired General Brent Scowcroft and the Federal Advisory Committee that came here during the big exercise that was going on that day to do an assessment of our nuclear command and control system. And because we were in that exercise at the time, we kind of just flipped from game mode to real mode, and had picked up a lot of what was going on. And as we were waiting for them to leave, all of a sudden here come 2 fighter jets, here come 2 more fighter jets, and here comes Air Force One. And so we were sitting there on the ramp watching Air Force One come in. The aircraft landed, they taxied over, a bunch of guys with curlicues got out and checked us out. We saw the president get out and get into the motorcade. We took the president into the command center, and they briefed him on what was going on that day. And so I was very fortunate to have been about 40 feet away from President Bush that day in the command center. The one thing I will always remember about that, though, was here you had a room full of generals, admirals, colonels, et cetera, that were keyed up. I mean, nobody knew what was going on exactly. It was very tense. And then here comes the president in the middle of all of that. So everybody was really keyed up. And the president, in an amazing, amazing show of leadership, demonstration of leadership, realized that. And he came in and he knew he had to break the ice. And so he kind of came in and he was serious about what was going on, but he also realized he kind of had to break the ice. And so he said some humorous things to kind of get everybody to calm down. And I just thought, what an amazing show of leadership at a time, when America really needed it. To see something that you would only really think of happening in a movie somewhere. Here's the president being briefed by senior leadership on, a massive attack on the United States. You can't not think that it was a historical event, But I think what was kind of going through my mind is, okay, this is history in the making, but where does the history go? How does it unfold from here? And so I don't know that any of us on that day could have foreseen where ultimately we ended up going. Terrorism was a thing that affected the rest of the world in the average American's mind. And then suddenly it became a thing that affected our world. And I think the sanctity and security that we've always cherished by being separated, by giant moats on either side of the United States was suddenly no longer there.
We were doing an exercise that time, and I had the midwatch, so I was supporting the command center as part of the battle staff there. So having the midwatch, I had just gotten off, came home, flopped on the couch to not wake anybody up, and wife came back from dropping the kids off at school, and she was kind of distraught, saying, "Hey, I think we're under attack." And I thought that somebody had let something out of the exercise leak out that, was, but so we turned on the radio and started listening to that, and I went back in for my normal shift there, and The exercise was obviously canceled at that point. So then we were transitioning from that to dealing with the current situation, and so I spent the next several days doing midwatch there in the command center. You know, I'd spent all my career prepping for one fight, and then you have this other one crop up that's, you know, kind of came out of left field. I think it's kind of shook the complacency off. You know, for the longest time, everybody's had this feeling of we're oceans away from any trouble. So what could possibly go wrong? And that was kind of a you know, psychological jolt, I think, that we're still, I think, coming to, you know, more and more realization that that's more and more the case these days with some of the cyber stuff we've seen and all that other kind of stuff. It's just like, it's not the world that our parents and grandparents dealt with.
On that day, I was in the alert facility for the National Airborne Operations Center, which is down on the tarmac of the flight line here. It's a combination of an alert facility and housing for the crews. It was pretty empty that day because we happened to have all three crews out. One was for an exercise, one was on alert, and one was picking up the Scowcroft Commission in Washington, D.C. That was for evaluating nuclear policy. So naturally they were coming out to off it. So in the office, as normal intelligence officers do, I have the news on, and Lester Holt broke in with an accident in New York City, small plane crash into the World Trade Center. As luck would have it, just a couple of months earlier, I had read a story about a B-25 in 1945 crashing into the Empire State Building. Really foggy day. And the article said, this couldn't happen on a clear day because the buildings stand out so well. And so when I saw it, I immediately thought, this is probably a terrorist attack. And as I was on the phone, the second aircraft hit one of the towers, and I said, now I can confirm that we're under terrorist attack. I was asked to call a couple of parents to let them know that their member was safe and out there doing the job they were trained to do, which actually kind of reassured me too. You know, this is what we do. Then got word that the president was coming in. So when the president came in, I actually just walked out on the tarmac and watched him get off the plane. Well, this time I felt like I was looking at the commander-in-chief, not the president. And I also thought at that point, Jim, you're living in a historic moment. I hope you don't screw this up. The great thing about this command is that we have a primary mission, that's strategic deterrence, and we never took our eye off that ball. If you want to think about things that changed, to me, the first thing that changed, it happened on that day when the aircraft went down in Shanksville, because American people decided sometimes you can't wait for somebody to come rescue you. It became important for people to stand up and act when there was no help around. And that was kind of different than all the training we'd ever received before, which was, if you're in a situation like that, stay quiet, don't be noticed, you know, wait for the authorities. Well, they knew that something had to happen, and they made it happen. And I don't think there'll ever be another successful hijacking attempt against a United States aircraft.